BlackRock and Vanguard are two of the biggest companies in the world, managing close to $16 trillion worth of assets. That's more than half of the entire GDP of the United States, allowing them to touch every sector of the economy. But this hasn't gone unnoticed, however. You'll find thousands and thousands of videos of people trying to bring these companies down. But the thing is, Vanguard and BlackRock don't actually own anything. Well, not exactly. Both BlackRock and Vanguard are the world's largest investment management companies, meaning they use their vast amount of wealth to purchase properties, commodities, and stocks, with their purpose being to produce great returns year after year. Unlike some influencers would want you to believe, the markets aren't as predictable as they may seem. Therefore, having the largest amount of funds available puts you in the best position to succeed. If you look at who owns the biggest companies in the world, the same names pop up time and time again. Despite them being some of the largest shareholders in the businesses they invest in, the amount that they own of the company is relatively small, but their influence is anything but. A clip has gone viral recently of the CEO of BlackRock saying that the company must force a change in the companies they invest in.
Well, behaviors are going to have to change, and this is one thing we're asking companies. You have to force behaviors, and at BlackRock we are forcing behaviors.
Now this video actually comes from a few years ago and has been recirculating online, but how exactly are they able to force a change if they own so little of the companies they invest in? A paper published by the University of Cambridge stated that we find significant indications that the big three might be able to exert forms of power over the companies held in their portfolio. The big three that this paper refers to includes a third company called State Street Corporation. They act in the same manner as the other two companies, just on a smaller scale. But how exactly do the big three influence the companies they invest in? Using the most valuable company in the world as an example, we can see that Vanguard is the highest shareholder with just over 8%, and BlackRock is second with 6.5% of the company. Combined, they only own about 15% of Apple. So let's say they wanted someone who would look out for their interests at the very top of the company. They would have to persuade at least another 36% of the shareholders in order to get a majority to vote the person in. That's more than double their combined stake in the company. That's not exactly an easy task. Despite this, BlackRock's co-founder has been an active member of Apple's board since 2014. It's a position that is voted for every single year. They can achieve this because having BlackRock and Vanguard as investors in a company inspires a level of trust within the other investors due to their reputation. Also, when large amounts of shares are purchased, there are less shares available, which causes an increase in the share price. This culminates in not only the investment companies voting together, but also the rest of the investors voting with them, as it results in a higher rate of return for themselves. If the big three was to ever pull out of a company, the exact opposite would occur. Lowered trust, but more importantly, a lowered share price, applying considerable pressure on the management team who are at the will of the shareholders.
How do you force change when it is so incremental and so gradual? How do you do something more radical?
And if the leaderships of the firms are not doing the changes, hopefully the board forces that change. And if not, it's going to be the shareholders.
You can see how this can easily be manipulated. Now, for the people who already know about these companies, you're probably waiting for me to talk about ESG. That's the environmental, social, and governance policies that BlackRock created to keep companies in line. All of the top publicly traded companies have an ESG score, which assesses how good the company is at these issues. As a result, it's caused a lot of backlash leading to boycotts.
This Bud Light boycott, it's sticking, it's resilient, it's not going away.
And funds being withdrawn from the companies associated.
The state of Louisiana announcing it will pull nearly $800 million from BlackRock funds, saying it is making that move over the asset management firm's push to embrace ESG strategies.
Even Vanguard has seemingly pulled back from the scheme. Amazingly, despite the huge influence that they have, they don't actually own any of the stock. In BlackRock's case, a large portion of their assets comes from both private and public retirement funds, reaching each corner of the globe, from America to Europe to Asia. You heard that right, the public's money is being used to make BlackRock more powerful and influential. But it also means that the more money they make, the bigger the pension becomes, as they have an obligation to act in the best interest of their investors. Vanguard is a little different, however, as it's a closed network of investors instead of public funds. In any case, this means that all of the voting rights associated with the stocks aren't in fact theirs, but are instead owned by their investors.
We have taken a responsibility in making sure we're doing everything we can for our owners of capital. All the $8+ trillion that we manage, none of it is our money.
Therefore, if you have a pension managed by BlackRock, then you have a stake in the companies that they invest in. That also means if you were to boycott these companies, you'd be negatively affecting your own pension. So to ensure that people trust BlackRock, they've even suggested giving the voting rights back to the fund holders.
If we could get some law changes and bring back the vote to the individual holders and all that, and we could do that.
But this does little to help you, as no matter where you stand on the political scale, there'll always be companies that go against your wishes. It's also worth noting that Vanguard is the largest shareholder of BlackRock itself. I wonder what that could mean. And you can watch another video right here.